The entire show is actually a D&D campaign being played in Mike's basement. It begins with the soft clatter of dice rolling across a wooden table, the kind of sound that makes you picture Mike's basement lit by a single lamp. Fans have been tracing this theory since Season 1, and once you start spotting the clues, they hit like a spotlight snapping on. Every major story beat in Stranger Things mirrors the structure of a classic Dungeons & Dragons quest, almost as if the entire adventure lives inside a campaign the kids are imagining together. That would explain why the plot bends at perfect moments, and why the adults seem strangely blind to chaos unfolding right in front of them. You can see the pattern in the visuals. Each season begins or ends with D&D energy, from the focus on dice to the familiar names borrowed straight from the Monster Manual. Character arcs rise the same way player stats do, with each member of the party slowly leveling up their abilities as the danger grows. Reddit noticed this immediately, and the threads never stopped multiplying. What gives this theory real weight is how it reshapes the emotional heart of the show. Every moment becomes childhood imagination trying to carry the weight of trauma. Will's disappearance might echo something real and painful that happened off the board, and the quest to save him becomes the one language his friends know to process fear. Some fans believe the finale could cut to an older version of the party sitting around a table, finishing the campaign they started years earlier, revealing that the whole series has been their shared story. Whether the Duffer Brothers would ever commit to something this bold is a debate the internet never lets rest. Meanwhile, there is a theory about Hopper that hits far closer to reality. Hopper's daughter Sarah never had cancer. She was Brenner's first successful experiment. The flashbacks show Sarah shrinking into the sheets of a dim hospital room, the light flickering in a way that never quite feels natural. Fans notice something unsettling the moment they rewatch those scenes. The timeline does not line up with what we know about Hawkins' lab, and her symptoms do not resemble the usual course of childhood cancer. Some viewers believe she was one of Brenner's early test subjects, experimented on long before the numbered children ever existed. A desperate father could have been convinced to sign off on treatments that looked like medicine, but hid something far more dangerous. Reddit picked up on this quickly, and the theory spread. This interpretation makes Hopper's hatred of Brenner feel much heavier than a simple professional feud. It becomes personal, a wound that never closed because Brenner took his daughter while pretending to save her. That weight turns every moment Hopper protects Eleven into its own quiet confession, a man trying to make up for a choice he should never have agreed to. Fans often point out how Hopper seems to know more about the lab than a small-town police chief should, which makes it feel like he has been carrying guilt for years. If Sarah developed abilities before she died, she would stand at the very start of the program that eventually created Eleven and devastated countless families. The darkest part of the theory is the idea that her death was not a failure in Brenner's eyes, but the first successful result that gave him the data he needed. Hopper's tragedy might have lit the spark that led to every later disaster. Meanwhile, there is a theory about the Upside Down that twists the entire mythology into something far stranger. The Upside Down is actually the future, not an alternate dimension. Fans started connecting the clues when Season 4 revealed the Upside Down is frozen on November 6, 1983. Some viewers realized that date might not mark when the dimension stopped. It might mark when it began. What if the Upside Down is not a parallel world at all, but a timeline that shows what happens if Vecna wins? A future version of Hawkins destroyed long after the apocalypse and somehow bleeding backward through time into the present? Reddit noticed the theory instantly, and the discussions only grew louder. The decay looks different under that lens. The ash drifting in the air, the brittle vines wrapped around every corner. The silence that hangs like smoke would not come from a dark mirror realm. They would come from our own world centuries from now, after the Mind Flayer has consumed everything living and left Hawkins as a husk. When characters step inside, they are not crossing into another universe. They are walking through the ruins of what their town becomes if they lose, seeing a future that should terrify them. This interpretation explains why the Upside Down only contains places that exist in Hawkins, and why it is frozen on one precise date. It marks the moment the timeline split, the moment Eleven's contact with the Demogorgon tore open a fracture that allowed the future apocalypse to reach backward toward its origin. The creatures stalking those shadows would not be invaders from another world. They would be the end result of humans and animals warped by the Mind Flayer's corruption over countless generations. If this theory is correct, closing the gates is not about stopping something from coming in. It is about severing a future that already happened in one branch of time, and is trying to overwrite the present. By the way, if you're a Stranger Things fan, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe because it helps more than you know. Speaking of timelines and futures, there is a theory about Will that circles back to the very first scene of the series. Will has been dead since Season 1, and everything after is his dying dream. The Demogorgon drags Will into the dark in the very first episode. the flashlight beam shaking as he disappears. Fans who follow this theory believe he never survived that moment. The body found in the quarry would not be a decoy as Hopper claimed. It would be real, and everything that follows would unfold in the brief seconds between Will's death and his mind shutting down. That lens casts the entire story as the final dream of a dying boy who tries to make sense of fear by imagining friends strong enough to save him, because that is what he needed most as he slipped away alone. The theory points out how Will is tied to the supernatural, despite having none of Eleven's abilities. It almost feels like the upside-down response to him because it comes from him, a world built out of a collapsing consciousness rather than an external force. His sensitivity to the realm, the way the creatures seem to know him, and his week-long survival in conditions that should have ended his life all become easier to explain when the Upside Down is seen as a nightmare shaped by his fading mind. Reddit picked up on this fast, and the speculation never slowed. Season 5, placing Will back at the center, could reflect his mind reaching its final moments, with the last battle becoming his final attempt to imagine a world where he and his friends win before everything finally goes dark. But the darkest theory does not involve death at all. It begins with a question about Brenner and what he might have been from the start. Dr. Brenner is actually from the Upside Down and has been manipulating events from the beginning. Imagine Brenner standing in the harsh white glow of Hawkins' lab, perfectly still, almost too still for a human. Some fans believe that stillness is the first clue. The theory suggests he was never human at all, but something wearing a human shape, an entity from the Upside Down that crossed into our world decades before the story began, and quietly guided events from behind the glass. Viewers point to his unnatural survival in moments that should have ended him, his strangely unchanged appearance across timelines, and his obsession with opening gateways that feels less like research and more like longing. Reddit noticed the pattern immediately. According to the theory, Brenner is an advanced scout or a stranded creature from that dimension who has spent years setting the stage for a full invasion. Human children become tools because he understands their emotions well enough to twist them, but feels nothing for their lives. This perspective turns his relationship with Eleven into something far darker than a warped father figure. It also reframes his endless string of catastrophic choices. He is not failing at his job. He is creating controlled chaos to thin the barrier between the realms. His apparent death in Season 4 would only be an illusion, because whatever Brenner truly is, may not be something that dies by conventional means. He could be waiting for the right moment to shed the disguise and reveal what has been beneath it all along. The most disturbing implication is that every hero in the story has been acting out a script designed by something inhuman, playing a game without knowing the rules. And if that is true, Vecna might not be the mastermind at all, but a single piece on Brenner's board. Meanwhile, there is a theory about the Mind Flayer that shifts the entire mythology into something even stranger. The Mind Flayer is actually a hive mind of every person who's died in the Upside Down. Inside the Upside Down, the air is thick with drifting particles that swirl like dust caught in a flashlight beam. Some fans believe those particles are not atmospheric elements at all. They might be the consciousness of everyone the dimension has ever consumed, fused into a single intelligence that is trapped and suffering. Barb, Eddie, and countless victims from Hawkins' lab would all exist inside that swarm, absorbed into a collective mind desperate to escape. Reddit picked up on the idea quickly, and the theory spread through the fandom like wildfire. Under this interpretation, the Mind Flayer becomes the show's greatest victim and its most dangerous threat at the same time. It would be a tragedy shaped into a monster by centuries or even millennia of trapped voices merging into one mind that can no longer separate its thoughts. When it takes hold of people like Billy or Will, it would not be trying to control them. It would be trying to flee through them, using their bodies as lifeboats to escape a prison it has been trapped in forever. The floating particles that cling to anyone who enters the Upside Down would not be signs of infection. They would be fragments of consciousness reaching for anyone who might carry them back into the living world. If this theory is true, defeating the Mind Flayer means making an impossible choice. The heroes would either need to free every trapped soul or accept that they cannot be saved and destroy them along with the entity they have become. But perhaps the most elaborate theory does not come from the past or the present. It comes from technology that has not been invented yet. Hawkins' lab wasn't studying the Upside Down. They created it using time travel experiments. Some fans believe the Upside Down was never a natural dimension at all. Instead, they think it was created by accident when Brenner's team attempted to send information or even people through time. According to this theory, the early lab work was focused on temporal manipulation rather than psychic ability. When the scientists tried to open a corridor through time, they tore a hole in reality and created a pocket dimension where time collapsed in on itself. The Upside Down became a temporal dead zone, frozen in place like an insect trapped in amber. It remains stuck on November 6th, because that is when the experiment reached critical mass and triggered a catastrophe that had been building for years. Reddit noticed the timing almost immediately. Under this interpretation, the creatures roaming the Upside Down would not be aliens. They would be paradox mutations. Living things twisted by exposure to broken causality until their forms no longer resemble anything natural. Vecna's abilities would make sense if he were someone caught in the original accident, forced to adapt to the warped environment over decades. The characters would not just be fighting a supernatural threat. They would be trying to repair a hidden time travel disaster. To stop it, they might need to go back and prevent the dimension from forming in the first place, a move that could erase the last 5 years of the story and trigger a paradox none of them fully understand. And that brings the theories back to a character almost everyone overlooks. Holly Wheeler is actually the most powerful psychic in the series, and doesn't know it yet. Holly has been on screen during crucial moments since the beginning, often lingering at the edge of the frame while the adults brush off her reactions as nothing more than a child's imagination. Fans notice something different. Holly sees things before anyone else does. She watched the Christmas lights flicker in Season 1 long before Joyce understood the pattern. She sensed something off about Billy in Season 3 before his attack, the kind of instinct that feels more psychic than playful curiosity. And in Season 5, Volume 1, Vecna chose her as a target even though she is younger than any of his usual victims. Reddit caught that detail instantly. The theory argues that Holly has natural abilities that surpass even what 11 is capable of. She is young enough that the world still feels open to her, which means she perceives the supernatural without fear or conditioning. But because everyone treats her insights as cute kid moments, no one realizes she has been reading the danger all along. Her quiet reactions might be evidence of a mind that senses threats the way other children sense moods. Vecna targeting her might not be about using her as a gate. It might be about removing a threat before she grows old enough to understand her gifts. A psychic child who was never tortured in a lab and never shaped by trauma could be far more powerful than 11 or 8 ever were. The theory suggests that Volume 2 will reveal Holly's abilities during a moment of crisis, echoing what 11 did in Season 1, but pushing it further. The twist would show that the real key to defeating Vecna has been sitting in Mike's house the whole time, dismissed as a 6-year-old, while everyone else was too busy fighting monsters to notice the most powerful person in Hawkins. But Holly's instincts might point to a deeper secret, one tied to the town she has been living in all her life. Hawkins exists only to contain the Upside Down. It starts with a clock ticking in an empty hallway, the kind of sound that makes you wonder who else might be listening. Some fans believe Stranger Things is not just inspired by the Montauk experiments. They think the show is secretly building toward a reveal that Hawkins itself was designed as a containment site long before the story begins. According to the theory, the government discovered the first rip in reality somewhere else in the country decades earlier, then relocated the entire population of Hawkins as part of a long-term experiment disguised as a normal Midwestern town. The school layout, the identical houses, even the placement of the forest would all be deliberate structural choices meant to keep the breach contained. Reddit noticed how often characters mention Hawkins being strangely isolated. If this theory is right, the town is not cursed by accident. It was built to hold something the world was never supposed to see. So which of these theories feels wild enough to be true, and which ones are fans connecting dots that were never meant to align? Let me know which theory you believe has the best chance of becoming real.